And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another AFLW round review. And sadly, ladies and gentlemen, we've hit it. We've been through all 10 rounds of the AFLW. We are in final series. As bittersweet as the home and away being done, we have finals. We have 8 teams vying to win a premiership. So let's dive through round 10. Let's go through the finals. And we have a very special co-host hopping on today from the Mongrel Punt, Mr. Alex Doherty. Alex, thank you for joining me, sir.
Thank you for having me, Donnie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Really quick, before we hop into the women's footy, can you tell me just a little bit about the Mongrel Punt?
So the Mongrel Punt is a fan-made website made by the great HB Myers, who has done so much has written so much about the game, both historical and present day. A couple of years ago, he was sort of looking to branch out towards the women's content as well, and I stumbled upon it one morning whilst perusing around the internet as I usually do, and I just sort of sent an email and I hit it off, and here we are. A couple of years later, I've been covering I've been writing about the women's sports independently since the start of the competition. But yes, from about 2020 onwards, I've become the Mongrel's #1 women's writer. But yeah, we love talking about footy, and we love covering all assets about the game of footy, and I just love it. It's every time I think about something to write about, HB's right there, and he's willing to lend an ear and an eye for what I've got to say. It's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. That is awesome. You are my type of person, sir, a footy nut. Being an American, it is hard to find people like me. We are few and far between. So when I find kindred souls, I love chatting with you. So let's jump into it. This is an AFLW round 10 review and finals preview. Really quick, before we go through the game reviews, what are your thoughts on a hectic and crazy round 10?
Well, you nailed it on the head there, Donnie. It was an unbelievable round of footy, and it's amazing to think that there were so many games where there's still something like on the line, in terms of top 8, in terms of top spot. Even a game like Melbourne West Coast, where you assume that it's just going to be a stock standard win for Melbourne, but as the game went on, we kept on asking the question of, are they going to do it? Are they going to get top spot? But it was a crazy round of footy, and I was so fortunate to catch a lot of the games in between a lot of work commitments and whatnot over the weekend. But yeah, it was a fantastic weekend of footy, and I can't wait for finals this week.
Oh yes, this was a perfect penultimate. This is a perfect finale to the regular season with how crazy it was, because we had a little bit of close, we had a little bit of blowout, and we had the draw. But let's go through it one by one. Let's go through all 9 games really quickly. I have to say, besides the draw, this was an absolute cracker to start off on Friday night, as the Western Bulldogs, by the skin of their teeth, and Ellie Blackburn, you superstar, Western Bulldogs get a 3-point win, 34-31. I love the doggies' performance in this one, because they just never gave up after kind of letting the Blues get up on them early, and then kind of having to scrap and battle back, doing the old-fashioned Bulldog scrapping to get back into this game. And then Ellie Blackburn with a moment of magic to win the game. But am I off a little bit going, I'm a little worried for the doggies, because you want them coming in a little bit with a stronger performance going into the finals, not playing a team towards the bottom of the ladder and scraping by?
No, I don't think you're off kilter there. I've been very nervous about the doggies all year, to tell you the truth. But I thought this was just a tremendous performance, and I was telling a few people, before the game, it's like, but don't expect us to walk over Carlton. Any Bulldogs team, because I've supported the Dogs for well over 20 years now. This team just does not make anything easy for any of its supporters, and not saying that's a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing either. Thank good Lord that Ellie Blackburn plays footy and plays it with us, because I say this a lot, but I would follow her to the end of the world. She is that tremendous of a leader, and just the goals that she produced, and the ability to burst away from clearances. And interesting to hear Nathan Burke talk about Ellie after the game and saying that she wasn't at 100%. And if that's not her at 100%, then for the competition's sake, I'm scared of her at 100%.
I would 100% agree. If that's not her at 100% with an absolute brilliant snap goal at the end, absolutely fantastic. And she's one of my favorites. If you had to twist my arm and say who's one of your favorites, I have to say Ellie Blackburn, because not only is she a great leader, but she's a damn good footy player. She's absolutely fantastic, a bull in the midfield. She'd be one of those that, as a Swan supporter, there was a little bit of giddiness when there were rumors she potentially could come up here, but I respected her decision to stay with the Western Bulldogs. She's done so much for the Western Bulldogs. I think that's where she wants to stay. I respect that. But there was a little part of me that really would have loved to have her up in the Harbor City, but unfortunately she isn't. But good thing for you, she didn't. She stayed there, helped you get the win. Let's jump from that one again. Heart palpitations down to the next game that I would say that you look at it and you go, are the Brisbane Lions stamping themselves as one of the guaranteed into the grand final, and who's going to play them? Or is this a little bit of Collingwood kind of hitting a wall because of some of the depth issues that they have in the midfield, not having Brianna Davey and Britt Benici for season 7?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Look, I personally, even watching this game, I think is a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. I think Brisbane have been by a country mile the best team in the competition this season, and with the exception of maybe that Richmond game where they probably still should have won that one because they had so much of the ball in that last quarter. I just don't think there are many teams that are looking to stop them. But on the same token, Collingwood have been very impressive up until last week when North absolutely blew them apart in the second quarter, and then after probably about 10 minutes or so in this game, the floodgates opened up and Brisbane were able to sort of steamroll them, and they didn't kick a goal until about, I think it was at 15 minutes, but about time on in the last quarter. So, yeah, there is a bit of nervous. There is a bit of nervous times ahead for the Pies, because they play, or well, Dogs play Collingwood. So I was like, yeah, I should know. I'm still just trying to think about the weekend that we just had. But I think, look, I have no expectations about the Dogs playing finals this year. So whether or not they get there against, whether or not they beat the Pies or not is, I think a little bit irrelevant to me. I just like to see them compete, show that they've got a stance on where they want to be in the future. But yeah, look, the Pies are a bit shaky at the moment. But I said that last season as well, right before we played them at Victoria Park, and they just tore us to bits in that game. So look, nothing's given in footy, especially during finals.
Oh yeah, it'll be an absolute cracking game between those two. But I looked at it and I hate doing this, but again, you almost got to look at it too. It was up in the Gold Coast. You had a little bit of the heat too. Brisbane is a little bit more used to it on a daily basis, so maybe that might have been another thing too, is that it zapped their energy, because I think Collingwood started off really well in this game. They just they hit a wall after about midway through the second quarter, and just it took them forever to kind of get their lungs back. And it also doesn't help when you have wave after wave after wave going forward. I mean, Chelsea Hodder, Jess Wardlaw, Greta Bodie, so many Ali Anderson playing well, Emily Bates playing really well. It is scary to see this Brisbane Lions team, because they didn't even have the best performances from some of their superstars, and they still put up quite a good result. So I like you. It is hard to see Brisbane not getting to a grand final this year with all their superstars, but stranger things have happened. So we'll move on from there to a game, as you kind of mentioned in your preview, in your thoughts on this, 78 point win by the D's, 79-1, in a game that you kind of lost the whole competitive game, and everybody started paying attention to the live ladder going, can Melbourne do this? And they fall 1 point short of making the top spot. I almost look at it and I go, this D's team, this was probably one of the craziest performances because it was less about the game between the Eagles and more about their play on the ladder. It was a weird dichotomy watching this game because it did kind of detract from the game because you were focused on that live ladder. As each goal was scored, they would tick up and they would tick up every time.
Yeah, it was. And the funny thing was, like, I was sort of out doing stuff around the house, and I had the game on the radio, so I was just sort of, just sort of paying attention, just mildly, and you can hear the commentators just rise up the stakes every time they kick the goal, Melbourne. And it was look, don't want to say they should have done it, but they had 24 scoring shots in that game for 11-13, and on if they were any clinical, and look, I'm a little bit. I'd say a little bit is due to Casey Fields. You may not know what it's like down there, but I've been there a few times, and it is just an absolute. Just you hear the term 4 seasons in a day at Melbourne. Casey Fields, which is about like an hour or so out of Melbourne. It literally is 4 seasons in a day. Like 1 minute it's sunny. You get it's absolutely pouring down with rain, and there's a mini tornado swirling around. So there's it's an odd ground, Casey Fields. Not my favorite, but Melbourne played so well, and they just know how to adapt to those conditions almost better than anybody else. And probably a bit like Brisbane, they've got a lot of players there from season one, and they've just sort of added those little pieces around it, and that they've just made them such an ultimate powerhouse. And if there is any team to challenge Brisbane at the moment, it's the D's, and it's got to be the D's because they've been slowly building away, and they've always had this team that has been in the top 2, 3, 4 since season one, but they just haven't really been able to get there. But I think this season is proving to be the season that Melbourne must nail.
I'm completely with you. I'm fascinated if we get the grand final that I think we possibly could, is seeing, does Taylor Harris make that big a difference? Because we did have the matchup earlier in the season and Brisbane got the win, but Taylor Harris was not in the game. And I'm weird. I think she makes a bigger impact on this Melbourne team than I think some people give her credit for, especially now that she's being utilized in the in the ruck position a lot more than she has previous. And with her contested marking and her kicking, she's a weapon that I think some teams have trouble stopping. So I'm fascinated to see if, again, finals can be weird, but it's hard not to think about that matchup again, Melbourne and Brisbane in the grand final, especially when you see those two performances back to back, absolutely showing their absolute class in this competition. So we jump to it. The third amigo of the three teams that everybody's been talking about all year in the flag contendership is the Adelaide Crows. And I've said this a couple of times, a couple of episodes. This Crows team is stumbling a lot more than I was expecting. This is a game, if you just look at it, you go, Crows fans had to have been a lot really nervous going into halftime, knowing that they were down to a Saints team that has not played well, has not been consistent, has capitalized on some weaker teams early in the season, and then got exposed against some of the stronger sides. They get their bounce back in the second half, but I still say this is not the form that you want to come into, kind of scraping by a low-level team in the competition. For me, I'm a tiny bit worried. Are the Crows coming in vulnerable, even to a lower team besides the Brisbanes and the Melbournes?
Yeah, I'm inclined to think the same. I think they've been, can compare it to the other two sides. They've been a bit more underwhelming. I was definitely not impressed by Adelaide's game here. I thought the Saints. Oh, look. they're just one of the Saints are one of those teams where you're just not sure which team you're going to get. One week they're going to look like they're a shot to make the top 8. The next week they're a side that's gonna looks like they're better off in the bottom 4. But I thought the Saints were quite admirable in terms of keeping the ball off. St Kilda were quite good in terms of keeping the ball off Adelaide. Especially in the first half, I think the inside 50 numbers were like 22-8 in favour of the Saints. So their ability to press and their ability to work a side like Adelaide, who are fantastic, they're a fantastic outfit, but they just look, it is a little bit concerning. I think there's a couple of players there that sort of have been down on in comparison to different past seasons. I think Sarah Allen's sort of been taking a little bit more of a backseat, I've thought, this year, and Eloise Jones has been sort of in and out of form, and players, and it's good to see that some of the younger players are standing up. Chelsea Bedell, Maddie Newman, I think they've been in career best nick, but it's also you got to point out as well that Chelsea Randall hasn't played the last couple of games, and she makes an incredible difference to this team. And it sort of reminds me of when Adelaide won the first flag, and they missed Erin Phillips a lot, and she was battling injury. And a lot of Crows fans got very defensive about when I said that the Crows were too Erin reliant, and I think that I think the problem with Adelaide is that they can be too reliant on a lot of their top liners. We know Ebony Marinoff's the star. She puts in every week, and Hatchard's the star as well, puts in every week. And we know that Ashley Woodland came to the fore in the second half. Danny Ponter loves to turn up games, and when she turns up, she is probably one of the best forwards in the comp, but she does it very sporadically for mine. So I just think it's that middle line of players, Donnie, that need to step up again.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you again. Chelsea Randall, that's a huge loss, because she is Miss Fix-It for this team. I mean, she can go anywhere on the ground and be effective. She can change a game. She can go in the midfield, get contested possessions, get it out on the wing, get it into 50. She can go forward, she can kick goals, and she can go back and defend better than most people in the competition. So she is a big loss. But when you have an Ebony Marinoff, an Ann Hatchard, a Sarah Allen, an Ash Woodland, a Danielle Ponter, I mean, you've got enough there. You would think this would have been a little bit of an easier game against a Saints team that, I mean, really, they were playing for pride. That's really, and you hate deducing it down to that, but that really is it. So I a tiny bit concerned. I hope Chelsea Randall's back, because you want Adelaide at its best. You don't want them going into finals less than 100%. But I mean, that's footy. Sometimes injuries happen, unfortunately, but it is a little concerning for me, their form this season. Even with Chelsea there, they've lost a couple of games that I think I've been kind of like, not such a great performance overall. But well, again, finals are a whole new kettle of fish. We jumped to it. I sat through this at 1 a.m. But I have to say this though. I was thoroughly impressed with this Geelong outfit, because this has been a team that has not been a scoring team. They have been really good defensively, really good in the midfield, and anemic up forward. Chloe Shear has come in, Shelley Scott has come in, and all of a sudden it is raining goals now in Geelong. And this is a team that I look at and I go, they're going to be a tough out in this finals if they can keep their defensive structure solid and can get goals from Shear and Smith and Shelley Scott. This is a scary team with how good they are defensively, and their stars in the midfield with Morrison McDonald and Georgie Prasparkas there. That is a scary team if they get going. On the Swan side, I'll put my red hat on, as I say most episodes. They fought as hard as they could. No Montana Ham, unfortunately, with VCEs, she wasn't able to play, but it was glad to see that she actually made it. I still think the Swans played pretty well. They didn't play horrible. Again, this is a young team. This is a side that had a lot of debutantes, a lot of players that is their first season in AFLW. You can tell, but there's growth. There's absolute growth. Cynthia Hamilton is going to be a superstar. She gets a Rising Star nomination off this with 19 disposals in this game. Fantastic performance. Ella Heads I think is an up and coming defender. Brianna Tarrant showed why she was a really good defender for Melbourne. She just couldn't get into a very good side. I'm I'm though they were 0-10 this year for the Swans, I'm bullish that I think next year they can get a win. We'll have to see how their offseason goes. Can they maintain everybody? Can they maybe pick up a couple of people? But I'm not so down in the doldrums for an 0-10 season because I saw progression from game 1 to game 10 in a lot of positive waves. I call me Mr. Optimism, but I'm not as down in the dumps as some Swans fans are for an 0-10 season.
I can see where the negative Swans fans come from. I mean, conceding 100 points in a game is pretty rare in women's footy, and only the second time in the history it's been done. But look, I tend to agree with you in terms of the growth. I mean, I looked at Sydney at the start of the year and I looked at their list and I'm thinking, look, they're going to be in for a rough one because the signings that they brought in, the AFLW signings, they're either young and raw or they're experienced and they're not exactly A-grade talent.
Mm-hmm.
Brooke Loughlin's a very solid player. Would you put her in as an A-grade player? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she's had a really solid year nonetheless. Morfitt's still developing. I think her last couple of weeks have actually been pretty good since she's come back into the team. Privatelli, I've had my ups and downs with her over the last couple of years, but I think her last month has been good. Brenna Tarrant, you've mentioned, continues to work her backside off. Was magnificent, and I'm very, very optimistic about your kids. I mean, Montana Ham, if she didn't injure her knee in the start of the season, I think she could have really had herself a magnificent year. Cynthia Hamilton, I just absolutely love watching. I think she's better off playing in the forward line, where that you can get maybe one or two more goals in the years that come. She just brings a lot of energy and a lot of pace, and good to see Sophia Hurley finally break in as well. And I think back to the game against Essendon a couple of weeks ago, and I just thought that's just sort of because I think she played a bit of footy down at Sandy, which is where I'm originally from, and she got to watch her play a couple of games. I just thought, she is an outstanding athlete and a fantastic footballer, and just good to see her finally pick it up towards the back end of the year. Big things are coming for those kids next season. And just to talk about the Cats, if someone was to tell me that they would drop 100 points before the season's done this year, I would have had to slap them in the face and accuse them of being crazy. It was just the fact that everything you said about them beforehand was true, Donnie. I think they've been, historically speaking, they've always been a very stingy outfit. They've never allowed any real easy opportunities for goals. Their midfield's been quite solid. This year they've elevated at least 3 levels. But the forward line was just always the issue, and whether or not it was McWilliams that was the issue, or lack of options around her, they found some really good options this year. And I've always been big on Shelley Scott. She's just a footballer's footballer, as they say down here. She just knows how to play the game, and someone with Chloe Shear who has got X factor talent. She's got great body strength. She's got great finishing abilities, and as well, I think the addition of Jackie Parry this year also has to be, must not be understated, because she struggled to get a look in at this Melbourne team that had Zanker and Harris and a lot of other potent scoring options. But now, there's games like this where you see her play and you see her clunk these grabs and you think she's good enough to be in a 21 at AFLW level. So a lot of people sleep on the Cats. Do not sleep on the Cats this final series. I think their match with North Melbourne's going to be it's going to be must-see football.
I 100% agree. That is the one game that took me the longest to tip, because I was like, so we'll find out how I tipped out later, but it was just that was the toughest one to tip for me, because it is such a toss-up, because I think the midfields are going to be that is going to be scintillating to watch. I mean, Bruton, Garner, and Riddell versus Prasparkas, Morris, McDonald. I mean, holy the matchups are going to be insane. Cannot wait for that one. So we jump to it. One of the expansion teams that I think has really, besides Essendon, that has really kind of surprised people has been the Hawthorne Hawks. They go out to Fremantle. They just fall short. But I'm gonna do it before we even talk about that. A huge thank you to Cara Antonio and Jess Duffin, two absolute stalwarts of the game, and both get goals in this game. Both play super well in this one. The Dockers get the chocolates in the long run, but what a great showcase for these two superstars of the game to go out on an absolute incredible games. So Frio get the chockies, but I think Jess Duffin and Cara Antonio are really what we should be talking about when it comes to this game.
100% agree with you. I think these two have been just absolute stalwarts for women's football since the inception of the competition. I remember watching Jess Duffin play an exhibition game when she was wearing Melbourne colours at the MCG one Sunday morning. I think it was she kicked the bag with about 5 or 6 goals, and you just looked at her and you think, geez, that's going to be some sort of player. And then when she got drafted to Collingwood, she was playing more in the defensive line. It nearly made me tear my hair out. It was just like, I've just never understood that notion of playing forwards who was just so good at taking marks, kicking goals, and then playing them at the other end. Where, look, I get it. You want the other team to stop from scoring, but I've always been more of a score more than your opposition kind of person. But she just forged herself a tremendous career, Jess Duffin, and Cara Antonio. I don't think words can describe just how much admiration I've got for her as a player. I think when she came to Freo first door, she was the first player I saw eyes on, and she was just such a workhorse. And then the fact that as the years got older, she was forced to adapt, playing more as a forward half sort of player, and the fact that she can connect and kick goals with such consistency. That's just, she's just been such a tremendous player from the very start. And even this season, when she hasn't been able to play, you've been able to see her influence around some of the younger players in the forward half. I think there was a game on the week a couple of weeks ago I was watching, and Cara Antonio had was on the coach's mic for Fox Footy, and she was literally holding no punches. She was literally telling the forwards, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. This is what we need to do as a team. And that's the sort of player Cara Antonio is. That's the sort of player that Fremantle should be building around. And I hope they keep her on as an assistant coach next year, because she is someone with high-end football IQ.
I 100% agree with you. I hope both of them do. I hope Jess Duffin continues, because she is an incredible footy mind. Same thing with Cara Antonio. I think both will be great for women's football if they stay on as coaches, because I think they're only going to bring that wealth of knowledge to young footballers, and with some of the skill and talent that are coming through the NAB leagues and the under 18s, though that experience and that knowledge will be priceless. You cannot let that get away. Absolutely fantastic. Again, great game of footy. It was a blast to watch, and to see those two superstars go out with great curtain calls was absolutely amazing. We jumped to Alberton Oval, which again has been fantastic for women's footy this year. I love seeing Alberton Oval get absolutely filled to capacity with Port fans. Unfortunately, the Bombers come in and win in a rain-washed out game that I watched the Fox Footy broadcast, and there were times you could barely see the field. It was raining so hard in this game, but Essendon wins the ugly game 37-10. Again, the Bombers were a little bit as we expected. They were the best of the expansion teams when it comes to record. Port, unfortunately, some may say a little bit disappointing, but kind of like Sydney, a lot of young kids, a lot of growth, and a lot of future for this Port Adelaide team. The big question I have for Port going this offseason is, does Erin pull on the jumper for one more season to get that elusive goal that she didn't get this season, or do we see her step away quietly like some greats like to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think everybody knew that Erin was going to join Port after Adelaide won the flag earlier in the year.
Least kept secret ever.
It had to be one of the worst I've ever heard in my days, Donnie. But look, I don't know. I wouldn't be too disappointed if she left today. I think she owes the game nothing.
Mhm.
She's been such a tremendous athlete and a tremendous trailblazer, and she deserves as much time off as she wants. But in terms of helping Port grow, I would love to see her play one more season. I think, look, I think results wise, Port probably would have been very disappointed. I think look, my own personal opinion of Port was, look, I wasn't sure, to be honest. I think heading into this season, they've got they had a lot of good veteran players there, but I think they've also got some really good young experienced heads that are going to carry this team the next decade. I think of players like Indy Tahu from
Mhm.
the ex Brisbane girl. Just for a player, like, she's not even 20 yet, and the fact that she can carry that whole defensive half on her shoulders is just tremendous. She's going to be one of the best defenders in the comp in about 5 years. I think Jackie Yawson's a criminally underrated player. Just love that she just goes in hard and tough and never takes a backward step. I don't think I've ever seen her take a backward step in her life. And then a player like Hannah Ewings, who, look, as people in the media, they'll flog around the term generational talent a lot. But I think Hannah Ewings is one of those players who can be a generational talent because
Mhm.
she's just got it all. She's got the skills, she's got the athleticism, she's got the football IQ. She can play multiple positions and impact en masse. So, and there are other players in there as well that I probably won't be able to name, but off the top of my head. But I'm big on players like Sarah Goodwin, players like Emily Borg. Sachi Syme has had a good year in the Sandful this year as well before being signed up by Port. But there's a good core, crux of players in this Port team that are 21 and under, and they're going to be carrying this team for the next 10 years. And there are going to be other players as well that are coming through the academy in the next couple of years. I know I think there's one coming through end of next year by the name of Lauren Young, who had a tremendous under 18s campaign as like a 15-year-old. And I watched one of her games, and just the amount of IQ for someone so young in an under 18s environment is just tremendous.
Yeah, Port is one of those teams that, again, I agree with you. And then having Ewings and Abby Dorwick to grow together is kind of almost a Hatchard Ebony Marinoff kind of combination potentially for the future. That it could be really scary for for other teams in the competition if they grow like I think they had. I think both have had really, really good seasons, and they've got so much youth. And again, I hope Erin plays one more. I think I really want to see her get at least one goal with Port Adelaide. So I really want her to stay. But I agree with you. If she retires, she retires with no shame. She did nothing important, did no damage at all to her reputation with an incredible athlete that she was. As much as I'd love to talk about this, we got to talk about the next one, because the next one was absolutely mental. I watched this game. I had to watch this on tape delay because this game was at like 3 a.m. when it started. So I watched the next morning. I am on the edge of my seat almost the entire game. This was absolutely fantastic footy as we get a draw between Richmond and North, 27-27. But I kind of chuckle at the end because even the announcers coming, it's like you would have thought Melbourne lost the game and Richmond won, because there was much more celebration in the Richmond side than North, though we had the draw. It was kind of this weird kind of eerie celebration at the end.
Yeah, well, look, I think for the Richmond girls, this means so much to them. Like, I think back to a couple of years ago when they entered the competition, they could barely buy themselves an inside 50, let alone a goal. And you fast forward it to today, and they're in the top four. And I think there's so much you got to credit to, and I think none more so than just their recruiting team. Like, literally, for the last couple of seasons, it's literally the midfield has been Mon Conti take on the world. And now you've got players from other clubs. Grace Egan's had a tremendous year. The
Mhm.
Hoskins have been able to come in and fill in roles within the team. Ellie McKenzie probably played her best game in her short career. She was immense through stoppages and in the midfield, and players around them as well. Like, I was big on Megan Kiley in the VFLW last year before she got picked up by the Tigers, and I said before the draft, if anybody picks her up, they've got a gem on their hands, because she's just just a tremendous athlete, a player that can run all day, and you put her in a position, I think she can flourish. And look, she probably may not be the most impactful forward, but she still adds a lot within the team dynamic. And as well, yeah, players like Tessa Lavey, who was more of a speculative pick when she got drafted. 20, I think it was 2020 draft she was taken, but she's come in and she's just looked like a player that's played the game for about 10 years.
Yeah,
The recruiting team of Richmond is almost second to none. The way that they've built this team this year, the last couple of seasons, second to none almost.
well, and the scary part about it too is that you didn't have Katie Brennan for a good portion of the season. I mean, this isn't even Richmond at full steam. I mean, Courtney Wakefield had an incredible season. There's no doubt that she stepped up. But think about Katie Brennan full-time, fully healthy playing. And then another thing that I think, and I know I don't want to jump to next season, but I do kind of think about it too, is Harriet Cordner still isn't on this team. And that was a huge loss last year for them last year when she went down because they lost their anchor in the back. Beck Miller's come into that back line and played really, really well. I think it's Jess Hosking has played defense. She's jumped in the midfield, but she's been able to play defense. And the wonder pick of the year, Eilish Sheeran, came out of nowhere. Nobody was talking about Eilish Sheeran, and she has been a absolute steal for this Tigers team. Her run off halfback, her delivery, and her absolute ability to run through tackles. She has been one of my absolute favorites to watch when Richmond plays, when she gets the footy, because she makes something happen. So this is a Tigers team. I've said it several times on this podcast. Anybody that's listened to me that knows this is my smoky team. This is my team outside the top three. I say keep an eye on, because on their day, they're tricky team to stop. We'll have to see. Again, the defenses that they're going to face when they come to the finals are going to be a little bit better than some of the teams they had on this run. But when you've got Grace Egan, you've got Ellie McKenzie, and you've got Mon Conti in the middle, with the Hosking twins being able to rotate through, it's a scary midfield when they get going. And the scary part is that they have one of the shorter but more athletic rucks in Gab Seymour, who I think has been absolutely fantastic herself. Stood up pretty well with Poppy Kelly against Emma King, who is one of the best rucks on her day when she wants to. I don't think she has the powers that she used to in the early days. I think Kim Rennie being out really, really affected her, because she's been so used to going forward this season. Kim Rennie's taken the majority of the rucks. Emma will pitch hit a little bit just to give Kim some resting up forward. But you can tell Emma King has not been in the ruck as much this year. And I think it really did affect North a little bit of their structure, but just their overall, because they've been so used to having that big target in Emma King up forward. I mean, Talia Randall's a great forward, but Emma King helps Talia Randall get even more open, because who does the top defender take? Do they take Emma King? Do they take Talia Randall? So it'll be fascinating to see. Yes, no, Emma. I know the North fans are screaming, there was no Emma Carney. I know. But would Emma Carney have changed that game? Maybe. I'm not sure. But this is a heck of a footy game. And this is a North team at 8 that is I'm going to keep an eye on. They're going to be scary potentially. They could be a scary 8 seed because they're that good on their day. We'll have to see how it goes, but they're definitely there. So we jump to it. The last game of the round, GWS Gold Coast Suns. I'll just be honest. I'm going to say it in a couple of sentences. Gold Coast disappointed me. GWS played out of their skin for Coruscant's 50th. That's just the easiest way to describe this game. Gold Coast, Ashanti Bush had her breakout game. It was great to see this young superstar, this young potential superstar break out and have a couple of worldy goals in this game. But this was all about Cora and her 50th, and GWS coming to play for their superstar. I mean, am I wrong on that?
Look, you're not wrong. I think the Suns' fate was decided on Friday night, and I think that carried off into their game on Sunday, because they just looked flat. They just didn't look like they wanted to be there. They just sort of looked more invested into the off season, which is fair enough. I think they've definitely earned themselves some time off, because I think, look, I'm not sure where you had the Gold Coast sitting at the start of the season, but I didn't think they'd be as close to the 8 as they did get. I think there's a lot of really good signs that are starting to come through. I mean, Charlie Rowbottom, it's amazing to think that her and Georgie Prasparkas are still in technically their first year in an AFLW environment.
Calendar
We could
year.
say
Calendar
yeah,
year. It is the oddballish, because they had two seasons in 1 year. That's why that's why I say it's their first calendar year playing footy. It's their second season. It's the weirdest. I know. I remember when I did the preview podcast start of the year, I'm like, it's season 2020 to be season 7. So it's really weird, but it's just it's that weird dichotomy. It's like, technically you're right, it was their first year, but it's technically their second season. So I 100% agree with you on that one.
Yeah. But she's been tremendous, and I think they've a few of their players that have come through this year have been fantastic finds. I mean, Courtney Jones, I'd ranted and raved about her season at Carlton earlier in the year. I think she's come in and filled in such a tremendous role as that small forward. Does a little bit of both connecting and kicking goals, and I think that sort of role in football is criminally underrated, because we don't see enough of those players a lot. We see a lot of disconnect between midfield and forward, but both in women's and men's. So I think she's probably one of the top 5 players in terms of importance at the Suns. And as well, I look at a player like Jack DePay, who has the podcast I do, the A3 Footy podcast. A small shout out to them. We've labelled it as the Jack DePay redemption tour, after a pretty look, I'd say underwhelming first season, but she's just come out this season and has just absolutely destroyed the role of second ruck to Lauren Bella, because she presents well forward of the footy. She comes in to pinch it in the ruck, and she does everything that a ruck should be doing. She follows up, she tackles, she pressures. She does a lot right, Jack DePay, and I think she's had a tremendous second season in the top league. And watch out for Talia Meyer next year. I've seen a lot of her at state level. It's great to see her get a chance again in the top level, but she just has a lot of pressure and a lot of desperation about her, and plays similarly to Amelia Yasir, who I didn't mention in the previous game at Richmond. I thought she played terrific for them. She had a lot of similar traits. I mean, she runs, she chases, she tackles. She really loves to force the opposition into turnover, and as well, Viv Sard is a player that I'd widely criticised a lot last season. Why was she playing backline? Why was she doing this? Why was she doing that? She looked like she was completely out of her element. You look at the stats, and the stats say she's second in the comp for intercept possessions. So it's like, where the hell has this come from? She's someone who's real. Maybe I've been a bit harsh on her because she's still trying to find her feet in the AFLW system, but she's just come into this team this season, and she's locked down a spot as the number 1 defensive option. And strange when you consider that Lauren Aaron still exists, and Jade Pagelli is still working her way back from a knee reco. So look, there's plenty of positive signs for the Suns. I just think, I'm going to call it early. I think they'll make the 8. I think they'll make the 8 next year.
I don't think you're jumping off too high a limb. My worry was when they lost Perko. I was worried that they would be a little bit rudderless, because she came in last season and really kind of stabilized a team that, again, had struggled the year before after she went down with her ACL. It was kind of like Harriet Cordner with Richmond. It was the anchor dropped out once they lost Perko that season, and then last year with her and Tara Bohannon's kind of jump to glory. Really kind of, I was worried Perko's loss would be much more effective on Gold Coast than it was. They were still a little Jekyll and Hyde for me a little bit. I think there were some games that like even this one where I expected more, and maybe it's my expectations, because I do see this young list with a lot of really solid players. Then I think if you continue to see the progression, I agree with you. I don't think top eight is a huge jump off when it comes to it. I think it is very much an expectation I think Gold Coast could have, is as long as they keep this group together. And injury is something that's going to happen, but if you can keep injuries to a minimum, this is a team that can make finals. Absolutely. They had a couple of games that they lost that they probably should have won, and that's the reason why the doggies are North Melbourne get in, and they're out. So absolutely fantastic. Again, 9 awesome games. Again, a little bit of everything, blowouts, mid to draw, everything. So we jump from that to the section that I call burning questions. And this is going to be a little bit of round 10 and a little bit of finals preview, because we have the finals to talk about. There are some scintillating, mouth-watering matchups we got to talk about. We'll go back round 10. We just discussed it, all 9 games. What do you think was the most impressive performance in round 10?
It's a good question. I mean, there's quite a few good performances. I thought Brisbane systematically destroying Collingwood was good. Melbourne really pushing themselves to try and get top spot was very good. I just can't look past Geelong though. Mm-hmm. I just think to score 100 points in a game in an AFLW game is almost unprecedented, and the fact that they just did it. And I'm sorry to bring it up again on your Swans, but
you're fine.
I think the fact that they just they just absolutely towed them up. They just looked so clean with the ball, and I think that was their biggest concern, was the fact they didn't have the outside run, the outside class, and they've got players in there now that can deliver. You know, mm-hmm. I've been big on Becky Webster for about the biggest part of 12 months. Mm-hmm. I think Zali Friswell. Thought she was a speculative pick about 12 months ago, but she's really come along strong as a winger. Michaela Bowen out of West Coast was just an absolute shrewd pickup of the highest order, and they've got forwards now, that know how to kick, and they know how to lead, and they know how to mark, and they know how to put a score on the board. You know, Chloe Shear, I'd sort of questioned about where her best footy was towards the midway point of this season, whether or not she should be playing more midfield, whether or not she should be playing more forward. I thought games last season when she played midfield, she looked like she was ready to tear a game apart. But now you play her forward, she's almost like the second coming of Tom Hawkins. And I've already talked about Shelley Scott. I think she's probably one of the most underrated players in the competition. Just smart, just really smart with her leading patterns, and just knows how to get others involved in the forward half. And as well, Kate Darby had a really good game, and I think she had a really strong role as the second up ruck to live fuller on the weekend. So I think for mine, Geelong, just how they managed to kick a winning score. It's been their biggest criticism since coming into the competition. That for me was the most impressive performance.
Yeah, I can't argue with you at all on that one. Like I said, I got to watch that one at 1 a.m. and even I may be a Swan supporter, but I had to clap a little bit, because that was an impressive performance. And Amy McDonald, absolutely, if she doesn't make All Australian, it is a travesty with her season this year. I'm gonna say this, and I know in the midfield in I've told most people when I do my team of the week, the midfield is the most difficult spot to pick, because you are splitting hairs at times with some of these absolute superstars that are in the midfield. But I'm going to say it right now. If Amy McDonald is not an All-Australian this season, it is a travesty, because she has been absolutely lights out. She's been very consistent in the midfield and absolutely incredible. She doesn't kick the goals that some of them do, but her disposal and her effective, and she tackles, she does everything in that midfield. Oh my gosh, if she doesn't, it's a travesty. That's, again, personal opinion there. I don't know. I hope not. I said the same thing last year with Kirsty Lamb. I said, if she doesn't get in, it's a travesty. She got in. Thank you. Because it's, when you have that type of season, you deserve that recognition. At least personally, I think that way. So we go from impressive performances to, I mean, again, I talked about it because it had me on the edge of my seat. Another draw between the Roos and the Tigers. Was this not the most exciting game of the round?
Oh, look, I'd say, look, I think it's a split between this one and the Dogs Carlton game on Friday
Hmm.
night.
I
Just
agree.
for the one biggest constant, the big constant between the both of them is that they both had high stakes. For Richmond, it was basically, if you don't lose, if you get a draw or win, you're in the top four.
Hmm.
And for the Dogs, it was basically winning, you're in, and they really had to move heaven and earth to do it. But look, I'm inclined to agree with you in terms of Richmond North being the game of the round, because Carlton, look, they were good. I'm not going to take anything away from them. I thought they really forced the doggies to work on Friday night, and they've been pretty up and down all season. But this is a game between two of the two top six teams in the comp. North are not the eighth best side in the comp.
I
They are
agree.
better than the Dogs. They are better than Collingwood. I think they are they are, and I think they could easily make an argument for top four. Like like
Hmm.
like Geelong, I think they've got a lot of elements right in terms of. I think their forward half was their biggest issue last season. I think they've really worked to try and rectify that as much as they can. Still some issues in terms of finishing them off, but I think in terms of the quality of game and in terms of the stakes that this game brought, it definitely was I definitely thought it was the most exciting game.
And who would have thought a tab through, you see her behind would be so exciting at the end of that game. It's like the watcher, she fists it through to make sure that they at least get the behind for the draw, and just the excitement was absolutely incredible. I have to say that was absolutely magnificent there. So we'll go to it now. We've been through round 10. We're going to go to the finals because again, we have four scintillating matchups ready to look at it. And I think all year, everybody said there are three teams that should be competing for the flag: Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide. But I have to ask, besides this top three, is there another team that you could see slipping in and causing an upset and maybe winning a flag?
Oh, it's a really good question. Look, I said at the start, I said almost at the top of the episode that Brisbane were probably the clear favourite, and by a fair way. Melbourne can challenge them. I think the Tigers can too. I think I look at this season overall, and I think they had, I think what was it? There was seven wins, two losses, and a draw. The two losses were against Geelong in a game that was pinched from them in the last 30 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
and a loss against Adelaide, which they lost through two errant kicks out of the defensive half. And I think back, especially to that Adelaide game, they dominated possession, they dominated control of the game for pretty much three-quarters of the match. And I think they've been very consistent in how they play the game, in terms of how to control the ball, how to pinpoint players inside the forward 50. They've got a good midfield base. You mentioned the rucks. Gabby Seymour's got to be, I think, probably one of the top five rucks in the comp right now. In terms of, not only can she win hitouts, but she is so versatile and she can play a lot of other roles for Richmond where need be, and it can allow a player like Poppy Kelly, who's also quite important structurally, to Richmond's spine. Um, and I said before, I think they've got a lot of good pieces around. Like forward line, they're pretty sound. Defensively, they've got really good, both defensive and offensive players. Libby Graham's been one of the best recruits this year. There's no high end, flashy numbers from her. She just goes in and gets the job done every week, and those are the sort of players I admire. But yeah, I think if there is a team outside of that top three that can do it, I think the Tigers.
All right, I'm 100% with you. I think the Tigers would be my fourth team. Would be that team that I would put in there as well. So we jump to it. Okay, the top four. There's always the discussion, especially in the men's game, is the top four. Those are the four teams most likely to get to the grand final. But I mean, you as a Dogs fan should know sometimes you're going to get a team that upsets the apple cart. So I got to ask, is there a team outside of the top four that could get to a grand final?
Um, Look, the cats are definitely with a chance. I think they can definitely get to the prelim, and then after that, I think they play the winner I think it was Melbourne and Adelaide in the prelim. So
Yep.
I definitely think they're a chance to get to the grand final on the back of if they can continue to produce what they have been producing the second half of the season. They're definitely in with a chance. I wouldn't rule out North either. I think it's going to be a lot tougher for them. They've got to beat Richmond. They've got to beat Geelong. They've got to beat Geelong, and then they've got to beat the loser of Adelaide and Melbourne, which I think they.
Melbourne, Richmond, Brisbane.
Yep, sorry, my bad.
You're good. I'm trying to remember it myself. I was sitting here going, who did I had to pull up the bracket just to be safe. Yep, the winner of North Melbourne, Geelong will play the loser of Richmond, Brisbane.
Richmond, Brisbane.
Yep, and then the winner will play the winner of Melbourne, Adelaide. So it's
so that's a tougher ladder to climb. But yeah, if I had to pick one, it'd probably be Geelong. I think they've been probably out of the 4 teams in that bottom half, they've been the most informed.
Yeah, for me, I love Geelong, but I think my worry is that it's the finals experience. So I would go North. I think the winner of that game, has the chance, especially if it's North, because North has been a team that has given Melbourne headaches. So if they can get by whoever loses that Brisbane Richmond game, we'll discuss that in tips who I think is going to happen there. If you can get by that game, if North Melbourne gets Melbourne in that preliminary final, I think North Melbourne can get to the grand final because North Melbourne has given Melbourne fits in years before. They have been one of the teams that has always given Melbourne trouble. So I think North is the team there. As you said, they're not an 8 seed. They're definitely not an 8 seed. They shouldn't be there. It's just the cruel way that is the 10-game fixture and the way it turned out. They're definitely not an 8 seed, but they're going to play the 8 seed. That's why I think they could be the most dangerous. So for me, it's North Melbourne, only because I think their finals experience is really going to help them, because Geelong's great in form, but they've not played finals. Yes, it's a GMHBA. Yes, they get the home field advantage, but North's played in finals. Finals are a different breed. So we'll have to see, can Geelong bring the same game? So we will definitely have to see about that. So I've got a Dog East supporter, so I'm gonna ask this. I have to do this as a Dog East supporter. How far can the Dogs go, and how far do you think they will go?
Look, it's an interesting question. I don't think they can go far. I just think you look at the teams around them, I think they've got way more experience than us. I think the game against Collingwood will be interesting because I think the last 3 or 4 games, they've really had the wood on us, and we just haven't had an answer for their ball movement, which I think is still a bit of a worry defensively. If we're caught in the fast break, then we're practically cactus. There are a lot of small issues at the Dogs that still need to be worked out. Obviously, I think the biggest one is our forward half unit, which, look, fair enough. We lost our 2 best key forwards in Bonnie Toogood and Izzy Huntington last season, and there really isn't anybody apart from now Morris Dalton who's still growing as a player that can really cover it. Celine Moody has been hit and miss as a key forward this season, I think. Gabby Newton, look, I won't put too much pressure on Gabby because she missed a full season earlier in the year with a shoulder reco. She's had some moments, and I think there's something to work with there. But I just think our delivery inside 50 to them has been abysmal at times this year. It's just been practically kick it on top of her head and see if she can take a contested mark. It's probably no different to the men, to be honest with you. Kick it on top of Aaron Norton's head and let him go to work. But look, I think our upside's tremendous. I think our upside is tremendous, and I think it was start of last year. Nathan Burke had a plan to win 2 flags by 2025, and I think we're in a step in the right direction with this season in general. I think if we win, like 7-3 is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like the caveat is that the 7 wins have come from the teams who sit in the bottom 8. And look, when you think of it like that, it's not particularly great, but they're still building like a winning culture there. They know what it takes to win games. The downside is the 3 losses were teams with teams all within the top 8.
Mhm.
The game against Melbourne was pretty egregious. Geelong was a game we probably should have won, and the North Melbourne one, I just think we were just outworked by a much better outfit. But they were all learning experiences, I think, for such a young brigade of players. You know, I just think about where players like Izzy Pritchard can go in the next 5 years. I think
Mhm.
about where Sarah Hartwig, who was drafted as a defender, playing forward the last month, has just come along in leaps and bounds.
Mhm.
We've got players like Jess Fitzgerald, who still has a massive ceiling on her as a midfielder, and I think Nell can get there as well one day as a top line forward. So look, in terms of I'd love to see this team get through to the semis, but I think the realism in me says that I think Collingwood's going to have too much depth and too much veteran experience to get through us this season. But I think the girls need to just take it in on Sunday, get a real feel for what it really is like to play against a side like Collingwood, who once they get all their players back, their big name players, they're going to be a top 4 team too.
I 100% agree. And the youth there is absolutely insane. I mean, and you've still got Will Cox, the young midfielder. Oh man, is she going to be fun to watch grow up? And the fact that she's got Ellie Blackburn to take her under her wing and teach her. There's so many things. I agree. Sarah Hartwig, that's a master stroke by Nathan Burke to be able to move her forward and be able to have that. And when you have Eleanor Brown to be that she can go midfield, she can play back too. So I agree with you. This doggies team, I mean, there's a lot of youth to see grow up that they're going to be a scary team. If again, they got to keep everybody together, which now that we don't have any more expansions, you shouldn't see the massive exodus like you have previous seasons, but you just never know how things are going to go. But I agree that the doggies, their future is very, very bright, especially very soon for you there. So we've gone through our burning questions, and now it's a little bit of your host here, a little bit my segments here. We have my team of the round and power rankings really quickly. So here's how I do it, Alex. Every week I do a lot like AFLW's.com. I do a team of the week, but mine's just a little bit different. I don't just go off of the disposals. I tend to make scoreboard impact and the impact on the overall game a little bit more. So there's going to be some names that maybe throw some people off a little bit. So bear with me. So for round 10, here are my defenders. Starting at defense is Karen Pearson from the Carlton Blues, West Coast Charlotte Thomas, Hawthorns Eileen Gilroy, Richmond's Eileen Sharon, and GWS's Tarni Evans are my 5 defenders for starting. Just like a normal AFLW game is 21 players. So I'll explain the bench at the end. In the midfield, your Western Bulldogs, Ellie Blackburn. I mean, you kick 2 goals in a game. It's hard not to put you in there. I stated she should be all Australian, and this was an all Australian performance. Geelong's Amy McDonald, Hawthorns Tilly Lucas Rod, North's Ash Riddell, and Richmond's Ellie McKenzie are my midfield. At the ruck, you said she was a second string, but when you kick goals as a ruck for me, you get the ruck spot. Kat Darby of the Geelong Cats is my starting ruck. And the forwards, I have Brisbane's Chelsea Hodder, Melbourne's Kate Hoare, Geelong's Chloe Shear, Frio's Anya Tag, and GWS's Georgia Garnett are the forwards.
Oh,
and on the bench,
great calls.
I tend to go goals. Goals are my biggest thing there, is that the more goals that you kick, and then I go from that, go with how's your disposals and your other stats go, and that's a scary forward line there. On the bench, I do it like this. I do a forward, a ruck, a midfield, a forward, and then what I call a utility. Can be anything depending on usually it tends to be a midfield, because that tends to be where I have a lot of. So, and then on the bench, defense, Laura Pugh of Frio. Rock, Ali Morfitt. You kick a goal as a rockman, you usually get a tip from me. Midfield, Gold Coast, Ellie Hampson. Forward, Adelaide, Danielle Ponter. And my utility is Brisbane's Kathy Svark. So that is my team of the week for round 10. Again, it's an interesting call. I know I ruffle some feathers sometimes because it's like, where's Maddie Prasparkas? Da, 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 da. I tend to do scoreboard impact a little bit more. I don't just go off of the 34 disposals. I mean, Kara Bowers has 34 disposals, 20 tackles, some whatever, but she doesn't make scoreboard impact. Like, I know she makes an impact on her team, but she doesn't make the scoreboard impact. She doesn't change the game. The tackles are great, but are you getting a holding the ball every time you make a tackle? So it throws some people off a little bit. My team of the
That
week.
is a controversial. That is controversial, Donnie. You'll get some upset Freo fans about Kiara Bowers. No, it's a good team. I love that you said precedence on scoreboard impact. I feel like you're sort of similar like me. I think you're more of a goals first, defense later sort of person, which is good.
Well, you don't get it, and
I
unfortunately, you don't get as many goals in AFLW. So it's like they're almost gold a little bit more. Like with the men's, you can get away with doing a lot of disposals because sometimes it'll lead to score involvements a lot more. Where with the women's game, because it's not as high scoring because of the shorter quarters and less people, it is goal. Every goal is gold sometimes. So if you can kick a goal as a midfielder, it's almost like two or three in the men's game. So that's why I tend to lean a little bit more that way. I usually don't get a ton of push. I one time, I think there's one week Hannah Ewings did make it, but that was because I think if I remember right, Maddie Pasparkas kicked two, Georgie kicked one, Ann Hatchard, Ebony Marinoff both kicked two apiece. Or some, so it was like I couldn't get her in, and I told the port, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'd love to get her. Next week they play Sydney, and she kicks three. And I went, Port fans, she's in this. So it's kind of it made me chuckle. It made me chuckle a little bit that happened. So alrighty. So we jumped from team of the week to my power rankings. And again, I tend to go off form when it comes to my power rankings. It was a little weird. For the longest time, I had Richmond in the top two because they had that winning streak and they weren't losing. So my power rankings from 5-1. We've stated it a couple of times. This is why I'm going to say this. North is number 5. I still think they're too good a team for me personally to be in the 8th spot. It's just the way the cookie crumbled in the long run for this. Number 4, Richmond Tigers. You get a draw. They had been at number 2. The draw kind of takes them down a little bit since they didn't win, but I can't drop them out of the top 5. They're a really good team. They're going to be scary. Number 3, Adelaide Crows. Again, you've got all that experience. You've got all that talent. They should be there. We'll have to see how it goes come finals. Number 2, Brisbane Lions. Just because of the fact that they've lost a game to a non-Adelaide Melbourne team. They've been a little bit lower. And the number 1, the Melbourne Demons, again, continuing to play really, really well. You can interflip Melbourne and Brisbane all you want. I don't think it's really going to matter who's 1-2. It really is 1A, 1B. Honestly, I really don't think you're splitting hairs when it comes to that power ranking. So, all righty, we have finished power rankings and we get to it, sir. We have come to it, the finals tipping, but we can't just do one round of tipping because we have a bracket. So if you don't mind, Alex, let's fill out our bracket and see who we think's going to make and be donning the flag at the end of the year. So let's go really quickly through it here. I will pull the bracket up and we'll go from top to bottom in the bracket. First game, Brisbane, Richmond Tigers. Who do you have advancing to the preliminary final?
Look, geez, it's a tough one. They're all going to be tough, I think, because look, if you asked me at the start of the, I said easily when they played first time this season, I thought, oh yeah, Brisbane will absolutely romp it home, but then Richmond caused the big upset. Look, I will go Brisbane, but I'm just gonna say it now with an air of caution, because I'll say that, but Brisbane will end up probably winning by about a sizable margin because I don't think they'll let what happened to them last time against Richmond again.
I think this is also one of those two that you also got to remember too. It's a location difference. The first game was at Punt Row. It was grand finals week. It was early in the it was kind of early in the day, so I could almost give Brisbane a little bit of a pass there. This one is going to be at Metricon Stadium, so it's going to be up in Queensland. The weather may be the most interesting thing here. Is what's the temperature like for time of game here? I agree with you. I think Brisbane wins this one. I think it's a little bit bigger than some people think. I think it's a 2 or 3 goal margin. I think Richmond's in this. I think Brisbane it's wave after wave after wave after wave that I think is going to be the downfall of the Tigers on this one because Brisbane is humming. I think they run into a buzzsaw here. They caught Brisbane at the perfect time. Early game, punt road at home. I think it was ripe for an upset. I think Brisbane, they know what they did wrong. They're at home again, Metricon Stadium, since the GABA is being redone for the Olympics and their home ground is still in construction. So Metricon Stadium will be their home ground for the finals. I just think they have a little too much different timing, and then the Queensland weather I think will affect the Richmond team a little bit too much. So I will have the Brisbane Lions on this. Let's go to the other preliminary final: Melbourne v Adelaide at Icon Park. It's not at Casey Fields. Will this affect the outcome? I don't think so. I think Melbourne's too good. Even if Chelsea Randall is back, I still think the D's are just a little too good. This there's so many of these games you could go game of the round. Almost all of these could be game of the round, but I think this one is. I think this one is under 2 goals. I think this is competitive the entire time. D scrape it out again. I think they push themselves into a chance to get to another grand final, their second in a row.
I'm going to go Melbourne, and I think they'll do it. I think they'll do it pretty comfortably, to be honest. I think the Crows have been look, yeah, they've been up and down, but I think Melbourne have been very dominant. I think I was doing a little bit of I was thinking about the last month they've played, and I think they've only conceded like an aggregate score of about like 4 goals 10 or something. It's in that, and that's in just a month of footy, which I think defensively speaks so much about how stingy they play when they don't have the ball. But then once they've got the ball in their terms, they've got players that can run and slice through opposition like you wouldn't believe. Like Karen Paxman is still playing out of her skin. She's not even playing predominantly as a midfielder anymore. She's playing more across as a winger, half forward option. And likewise with Lily Mithen, who again, just one of the most underrated players in the comp, because no one really speaks about it, but you just watch her on the field and she just runs and she does this and she just wins a lot of her contested ball without any fuss. And players like Liv Purcell and Liza West are just absolutely just running wild in the midfield. I just don't know how much of that Adelaide can take.
Yeah, the rotation through the midfield, I think it's deeper for Melbourne than for Adelaide for sure. We jumped on GMHBA Stadium, Geelong, North Melbourne, the most anticipated game. Again, it's 5 versus 8, but this is 5 versus 6, not 5 versus 8. I'm going with the upset here again. I think the experience, as I kind of stated in the who we thought outside the time, I think the experience shows here. I think Jazzy Garner, if Emma Carney plays, you've got an experienced finals tested player on each of your lines. If you have Emma King go forward, I think that could be a death nail a little bit for this young, inexperienced finals team when it comes to Geelong. Yes, they're talented. Yes, they're good. But when you've got that experience of finals, you know what it's like. You've been under that pressure. I think it's going to show. I think Jazzy Garner shows why she's one of the best in the competition. I think Melbourne wins this one. It's close. I still think Geelong is in this. Their talent will serve them. They're just going to fall just a tiny bit short. I have North Melbourne by less than a goal here.
Yeah, you're not wrong when you're saying this was the hardest one to tip, because I'll look at it one of two ways. I think Geelong just will continue to surprise everybody and just wipe the floor with North. But then you mentioned their lack of finals experience in comparison to North Melbourne's, and finals is a different ball game. It really separates the elites to the also rans. I suspect as well what happens with Georgie Prasparkas this week is going to be telling for the game, because she rolled her ankle late in the game against Sydney, and it looked bad, but it didn't look like there was any significant injury. So rolled ankles are a real pain in the neck to come back from at the best of times anyway. So how she stands up is going to be important. I just think, Look, I know I said Geelong could make the grand final, but against the North Melbourne side,
Like I said, this is
and
this is the most difficult one because again, you could also go Georgie Persparkis was out for a couple of games and Geelong played like she was still there. Like there was no difference between their performance. Amy McDonald could go absolutely nuts here. The issue I see is can Olivia Fuller and Kat Darby at least equalize the rock position to where they take away Jazzy Garner getting first off to the ball. Because if they can get Georgie and Nina and Amy McDonald the footy just as much as Jazzy does, I think they can supply it. Can Chloe Shearer, Shelley Scott, and the forwards get open, and they have to kick goals, especially in finals. Behinds will get your behind kicked in this. So goal accuracy will be absolutely massive, and sometimes Geelong can be a little wayward. But again, this is one I'm so excited for this game because this is a coin toss of the coin tossiest because you just don't know. Like, I mean, you've seen examples in the men's. One team comes in with a ton of finals, one team doesn't. The team that had finals ends up losing. So it's come see, come saw. Like I said, I'm going to tip North Melbourne. I go with a little bit of experience here, but you just never know. It's a GMHBA, and it's been a absolute hunting ground for the Cats this year.
I'm gonna tip Geelong. I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna
I
pick
love
Geelong
it. I love
because
it.
I look. You mentioned North are going to get Kim Rennie and Emma Carney back this week, and I think they're both add a lot structurally, but do they put impact on the scoreboard like you said? Emma Carney could possibly do something off a halfback and can generate a lot. Kim Rennie's good as that sort of extra tall in the back line as a forward. But I just look at Geelong and I think they're in better nick than North are at the moment, I think.
I don't begrudge you, sir. I do not begrudge you at all. Like I said, that was a difficult one. So, all right, we get to test your loyalty, sir. Vic Park, Collingwood, Western Bulldogs. I'm gonna make you tip this one. Are you tipping with your heart or are you tipping with your head, sir?
Uh I've always I've always tipped with my head, and there have been many times in the men's and in the women's where I've gone against my own team because I just didn't like how they were playing. Um, Look, this is another tough one. I just no look. I will back us in. I think we've got Collingwood at the right time. I think there is a little bit of blood in the water in terms of. I think Collingwood's problem is that I don't know where the goals come from. I think our defense has probably been our biggest strength this year. My issue with players like Elsa Brown and Katie Lynch is that they, when even given the slightest amount of pressure, they turn the ball over with their kicking. And I cannot stress to you how many times I've nearly thrown the remote at the TV at the sight of Katie Lynch turning the ball over with little pressure around it. But no, I'll back us in. I've been very impressed with the girls. I'd love to see them just at least get one on Collingwood before we lose to a top four team in spectacular fashion.
I love it. I absolutely love that. I'm gonna tip Collingwood only because there's one player that I think can make or break a game sometimes for Collingwood, and that's Chloe Malloy. If she can get herself free, if she can make an impact, she can change games. They've got Michaela Can, they've got Sarah Rowe, they've got some experience there. And again, what I still say is scary about Collingwood is that they've gained some depth in a midfield that is going to be scary next year when you get Britt Benici and Bree Davy back. So is Collingwood kind of, is this one of those seasons you get through so then you get back to full force next season with it, two elite midfielders back into your midfield? I think Collingwood, Vic Park can be a horror ground at times. Who's going to take Sab Frederick? I worry with that is who takes Sabrina Frederick up forward, because if they can get her consistent supply, she's going to be a matchup nightmare. We'll really have to see. I'm going to tip Collingwood, but I see everything that you say on this is that the Doggies are in much better nick. They come in on wins. Collingwood's coming off losses, but there's just something about this Collingwood team that I think they come in angry. I think they come in like they are angry that they are here where they are. And is that going to spark them? And then when it comes to goal kicking, because it's been inconsistent for the Doggies, is that's a stingy Collingwood defense sometimes that can be miserly and out down back. And Livingston can be very physical in the background. Butler can slip off halfback. So I'm going to tip Collingwood in this one, but I'm not super confident on this one either, because the Doggies have that skill and that ability. And again, Ellie Blackburn again can take over a game just like Chloe Malloy can. And if she does, it can be lights out. So I'm going to tip Collingwood in this one, but I'm not super confident. All right. So we will pull our brackets up and go from there. So going off your bracket, you have Brisbane advancing. So you have a Richmond v Geelong first semifinal. Your second semifinal will be your beloved Dogs versus the Adelaide Crows. So really quickly, we'll go through your bracket to the preliminary final. Who do you have? Geelong, Richmond.
Geelong, Richmond. I'm gonna go Richmond.
All right, Richmond moving on, and then your Doggies versus the Crows.
Oh God, I'd love to base it off last season and say the Dogs win. Look, it may not be out of the question if they do, but I think the Crows will be. I think the Crows would be. I think too strong where it matters. I think.
All righty. So, and with mine, I have Richmond v North. Oh, rematch of this draw. I liked Richmond. I like Richmond's game when they had it in. I like Richmond in that just because I don't know. There's something about the way they play that I think will give Melbourne headaches, especially playing a very solid defensive team in Geelong the previous week. So I will agree with you on Richmond. I have Collingwood v Adelaide. Adelaide just too strong, just too good. Probably going to be at Norwood, and Collingwood. The women's have not traveled as well as the men do, so I will have Adelaide as well. Moving on, so that we'll see. I think for let's see, for both of us, it's the same matchups: Brisbane v Adelaide, and Melbourne v Richmond. How do you see your grand final shaping up?
So is it Brisbane v Adelaide? Is it?
Yep, Brisbane, Adelaide, Richmond v
Brisbane,
Melbourne. Yep.
Brisbane easily over. I just think compare the two teams. Brisbane, I think it's just head and shoulders above the Crows on current form, and the other one Melbourne Richmond. I just see it being. I can just see it being a Brisbane Melbourne grand final.
All right, and I'm with you. I think Brisbane being it'll be up in the Queensland. It won't be in South Australia. I think that'll take a little bit of the magic away from the Adelaide Crows. I think Brisbane move on. I agree with you. I just think Richmond has a great team, but the defense from Melbourne and their depth in the midfield, I think, will be able to handle the three-headed monster of Egan, McKenzie, and Conti, even with the Hosking twins being able to hop in. When you have West, Purcell, Paxman, Mithen, and then Lauren Pierce is just as good a midfielder when she goes through there as well. Taylor Harris can come in. I think just a little too much strength for Melbourne there. So like you, we both have Brisbane, Melbourne grand final right now. I know there's plenty to happen. There's injuries and all that. Who do you think is raising the cup in your grand final? Brisbane v Melbourne.
Oh, look, I'd love to say Brisbane. It's just going to be one of those games where you just don't know what happens until it actually happens. I think, look, as much as I've said all episode that Brisbane's going to be the team and has been the team, I sense Melbourne. I just really sense Melbourne. This is Melbourne.
You and I are you're very much alike, except for the two semifinal wins. I'm the same. I think Taylor Harris makes that big a difference. I think the depth of midfield, I think, will neutralize Brisbane's advantage there. I think their defense has been good enough. Their defense is good enough. I think they can stymie the Dixon Hada, Zemi Farkleton, Wardlaw type of monster that is that forward line for Brisbane. But I just don't see. I mean, Kate Lutkins, I'm not sure, can Kate Lutkins stay with Taylor Harris? And then it's Kate Hoare, it's all the forward line ability. And then I said, Karen Paxman being able to go to the wing. Can she lock up an Orlo Dwyer? So I like the match. I like the matchups for Melbourne, even if it is in Metricon Stadium up in Queensland. I still like the matchups. I think Melbourne is on a mission. they're on a mission to win this. They fell short against Adelaide, and I think they've kind of played that way most of the season. They had the hiccup against Brisbane, but again, no Taylor Harris nor Jordan Ivey. I think we're both not playing in that game. I think they do make a change. I think the Melbourne Demons are the one raising the cup at the end of this, and maybe, just maybe, I'm teasing it, I'll say it, I think Daisy Pierce walks out as a champion. I think she retires
Yeah.
after the game. Like, I honestly just, that's my feeling. If they win a flag, I think Daisy retires, which would be a swan song of swan songs for an absolute legend of the game for sure. And that will do it. Alex, thank you so much. And action-packed, jammed episode here, because we had so much to talk about. Round 10 scintillating, finals scintillating. Absolutely can't wait. I appreciate you coming on the episode. It's been absolutely fantastic to meet and chat women's footy with you, sir. Please enjoy the games. My best of luck to your doggies in the finals there. Though I may have split loyalties a little bit. I did have the luxury of talking with Steph Kiochi earlier in the year. She's absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to be watching that as neutral as possible, because I both teams I enjoy so much.
Sorry, Donnie. Sorry, Donnie. Just a funny thing about that is that Steph Kioshi and I actually go to the same gym. So I've seen her I've seen her around a couple of times, and oh look, I've just allowed her to be her own person. But if I see her at the gym this week, I'm gonna let her know about it. Just go easy. Give the doggies a bit of a run. No, thank you for having me on, Donnie. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. Been a pleasure to meet you, and hopefully you'll have me on again sometime soon.
Sure, we will definitely stay in touch, sir. Worst case scenario, I know you write for the men's as well. I do my men's with my other co-host, with my with the kind of the channel host Ross. So we will definitely probably try to have you on again for another footy episode. Might even try to get you on for one of the finals episodes, because there's going to be a lot to talk about when it comes to the finals and everything like that. So it has been a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Donnie's Disposals AFLW round review. The finals are here. Enjoy it, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be fantastic. And we will see you again next week.